I think in Florida, perhaps more similar to Brazilian scenarios, crop livestock integration with longer seasons means, something actually planting different things at a time. But in Ohio, we have a very short season. And so the crop livestock integration here is a little different. And finding that is one of my research topics. How can we bring more diversity to our farms with such a short and difficult season to deal with? We have a spring that is very wet, summer that is dry and hot, and then a fall that is kind of in the middle, and then we're done.
Welcome to the Crop Science Podcast Show. My name is Brian Rennell, and I'm coming to you from Oklahoma State University. And this show is brought to you on behalf of Wysenetics. Today, excited to have Dr. Marilia Chiavegato. Sorry, I told you I'd butcher it, and that's okay. She is assistant professor in agroecosystems management, the Department of Horticulture and Crop Science, and also the Department of Animal Sciences at Ohio State University. She's pulling double duty in two departments with that work. She's been an integral investigator in gaining funding for research projects and has provided leadership and development in a productive research laboratory with 9 ongoing research projects. She's also taught 2 newly developed grad level courses, Systems Approach to Research and Environmental Impacts of Crop Livestock Systems, the latter being cross-listed between the two departments. Dr. Chiavegato, excited to have you on today. First, tell us, how did you make your way to Ohio State? What is your background? What is your story?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. So I'm from Brazil, originally from São Paulo, Brazil. I started my path, I guess, with an agronomy degree from the University of São Paulo. From there, I had a master's in applied chemistry, but that's when I started working with pastures and grazing systems. So my project was actually in Rondônia, in the Amazon forest region in Brazil. So traveled all the way there. From there, I felt like I should continue working with these animals and the forage and the grazing systems. And then I moved to Michigan State and worked with Dr. Jason Roundtree and Wendy Powers at Michigan State University, looking at carbon and nitrogen fluxes in 2 contrasting grazing systems. I went back to Brazil after that. I just wanted to go back home for a while and did a postdoc also in the animal science department, University of São Paulo, again, looking at dairy systems. That was my first time, I guess, working with dairy and also carbon and nitrogen fluxes. And then Ohio State opened this position, which was split between the crop science and the animal science. And I felt that my approach with the systems approach and trying to look at the plant and animal interactions would fit really well with this position, especially this split. And so I applied and came back. And I've been here for 5 years.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm absolutely fascinated and excited to dig into what you're doing because, of course, we're in the Southern Great Plains here in Oklahoma, and the crop and livestock integration is critical, essential for the livelihood and sustainability for our semi-arid and challenging environment. But share with our listeners a little bit about your ongoing research.
Yeah, that is interesting, the crop livestock integrated systems, because I found out that means different things wherever you go. Right. So in Brazil, I think in Florida, perhaps more similar to Brazilian scenarios, crop livestock integration with longer seasons means, something actually planting different things at a time. But in Ohio, we have a very short season. And so the crop livestock integration here is a little different. And finding that is one of my research topics. How can we bring more diversity to our farms with such a short and difficult season to deal with? We have a spring that is very wet, summer that is dry and hot, and then a fall that is kind of in the middle, and then we're done. We have nothing else going on during the spring. So here is an integrated system integration more between farms, combining manure use, hay, and the crop silage, animal feed. And the system is more, let's say, at a regional scale, and how we bring these people together to collaborate. So I have one of the projects is about that, is looking at ways of integrating manure into cropping systems or cropping into fully livestock systems, and how that affects the carbon and nitrogen cycling in the systems from a farm level perspective. And then in this project, we collaborated also with social science, water cycling, water losses to look at a whole system approach to these different modes. That's one of our fronts.
That is fascinating. I often forget. I mean, you are in Ohio, so you have winter, and so for us and for you, I originally come from São Paulo, and I spent time in São Paulo up through Goiânia in that region. You could graze. We can graze in Oklahoma all year long, yet you're shut down, and trying to integrate that has to be complicated. So in that line, what are some of the approaches you're doing to integrate in this much shorter cropping window?
Right. So there's two different things that we're doing here. First is the collaboration between farms and try to use the land more efficiently in neighboring farms. So integrating, you plant corn, I'll plant hay, and with that, we're going to have the resources that we need throughout or elongate our season a little bit more. The second aspect is trying to find specific forage diversification strategies for grazing cow-calf systems, which is primarily what we have. We do have some grass-fed systems here too. And how can we start earlier, and how can we end late in the fall. And then have this season, a little longer. And then also produce the hay or deferred areas that we can go through winter if we're looking at a total grass-fed system. So like the warm season grasses, native warm season grasses is an area that we're looking at now. Big blue, little blue, Indian grass mixes, and associating that with specific grazing management that would allow more rotations, more cycles, grazing cycles in the area. So that's one area too that we're looking, specifically looking at forage diversification strategies to have the longer seasons.
That's fascinating. I want to go back to your first note. Basically, and how I envisioned it from what you said was a farmer cooperative system where they're working together. I take it that most of it is farmer A plants the crop, farmer B plants the forage, but is there much talk about diversifying fields themselves where a single field is going from a crop to a forage and adding that diversification of potentially bringing livestock onto ground that was traditionally crop only?
Yeah, there's one thing that we're going, actually this demand is coming from farmers, is grazing crop residues. So then after corn, or cover crops grazing, which was something we didn't see much. The cover crop was just cut or mowed and nothing was really being done with that. So we have some work looking at like rye and corn and adding the animals to these areas. I've been working with Laura Lindsay, Alex Lindsay here, and trying to, bring the animal to their fields where they're planting corn, rotating corn, soybeans with the cover crops. The grazing of crop residue is something that came up. I'm actually also teaching grazing systems and management now. And that came up a lot from our students, producers, and they were thinking, how would I do that? And I brought a guest lecturer to specifically talk about it. So it is something that we can see it's starting, farmers are starting to consider and want to learn more about, and is a direction that we're going to take. But I feel like it's relatively new, and probably that comes from, I guess, the sustainability talk. There's a lot of how do we increase soil health? And how do we bring manure back to these areas? How do we spend less in fertilizers? And then then these things start come up to us.
So for our region, grazing crop residue, grazing corn stalks, sorghum stalks is a very commonplace. It is a very common action. What are some of the challenges that you would experience in Ohio with trying to graze crop residue?
I guess it's primarily not having animals in these farms. In the first place, they're just not there. Our farms are very specialized still. And then if there is a livestock farm, and then they're going to plant corn, so then we're talking about how is that going to fit into their system? What are they going to do with this corn, and how they're going to use it? So I think the challenge is still a system level change. How does that fit in our farm conditions?
I always, I get bound up in my own location. I love getting out because even in Oklahoma, a specialized farmer or farm family means that one brother handles the cattle and
Mm,
one brother or sister handles the farm, right? And so, or the crop. And so we still have majority of our producers still have livestock
mhm.
on acres. We have a lot of marginal ground though. So, not every acre is a farmable acre.
That's interesting. And we found, so this study that I was saying about the modes of integration, we did there's a social team,
Hmm.
social science team that was interviewing. And like, what do you plant and why do you plant just this? There was some cases where that was true. And one family did that, another family did that. And then the question was, can you integrate? And
Hmm.
usually it's like, but I'm a cow guy. I'm a
Yeah.
crop guy. I don't have the equipment. I don't know. This is up to them. It's not up to me,
Yep.
you know?
So, how many in the region? I know it differs from north to south across Ohio, but what would be the typical amount of grazing days a farmer could get out of a system? Whether it be, I guess I'll rephrase it, a traditional amount of grazing days versus what you think you can get if you intensify or do some diversification of species.
Mhm. So usually we're starting under normal scenarios, we would start grazing early May, luckily,
Hmm.
mid May. And we finish after summer, we would finish in September. There was some strategies with the cover crops or planting cover crops to
Hmm.
bring that to November, to Thanksgiving. But grazing by Thanksgiving is great, like,
Is done.
yeah, you would be like, wow, you grazed by Thanksgiving. That is really long. But this year, with our forage diversification plus the grazing management, we grazed last week for the first
Hmm.
time. And this is late April. So we started early. We were able to do that. And now we'll see how long we can go. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm hoping that we can go. I'm hoping that we can go until at least mid-November or hit the Thanksgiving date.
Now, I want to ask this, being very jealous of your answer. I already know what kind of stocking rate are you able to manage, especially on this diversified, trying to stretch your grazable days. What kind of stocking rate are you looking at?
What we're doing actually, so let me explain this a little bit first. We're planting cool season, warm season, and in separate areas. And so from there, we're going grazing the cool season first. Then we're going to move them to a warm season plot and go back to the cool season. So they're integrated on time, And the next step is try to plant the cool season and the warm season together. And all that applying more frequent grazing management. But
Hmm.
now it's very controlled and experimental.
Hmm.
So we're just bringing cows, put and take, to control our grazing strategy. And then when we expand that to an area, I'm not entirely sure how much we're going to be able to get yet.
We're here today with Dr. Marilia Chiavegato. She's the assistant professor in agroecosystems management with departments of horticulture, crop science, and animal science. Again, she's working for both the crops and the animal folks at the Ohio State University. Really enjoying our conversation, talking about the diversification of systems for both agriculture, for both farming or I guess crop systems and animal livestock systems. Marilia, what else are you working on within your program? Because I know this isn't your only focal point.
Right. Another thing that we're working on now is trying to handle the effects of weather. So, like I was mentioning, in Ohio, we have a short season and it's very marked with a wet, dry, wet. So it's wet springs, dry summers, wet falls. And what happens there is that we go from areas that flood, after rain, our soils, they don't completely absorb the water. And so the water accumulates on the top of the land. And then we go for a soil that is extremely dry, even cracked dry, and then wet again. And so that is being affecting primarily our forage and grazing areas. And we're looking at how we add resilience to the system. So another aspect of my work is looking at ecosystem response to weather or environmental disturbances or weather changes that push, the system and then decrease yield or quality, which we don't want.
I imagine in that system also you have a lot of challenges with animal health. I'd imagine in that wet spring, wet fall, a lot of challenges with foot rot and many of those other things. Is there systems or approaches that you're looking at that would also improve animal health as you're looking at these bimodal seasons?
Yeah, that is interesting. There was a colleague here in animal science. They studied the effects of mud in the spring on weaning age, and mature cow weight too. And there is clearly an effect of that. And what is the most interesting of that, I think, is this flooding is not something extremely that it's strong or big or large areas. It's something subtle, like it's a couple of days that you have this flooding and that creates a little mud and then it dries, but then it happens again and then again. And so it's a small change that affects animal behavior, affects daily weight gain. We saw that it's affecting our root growth, our carbon sequestration potential. It's affecting our forage quality, the botanical composition. It's a slow pressure happening over and over and completely modifying our system. So that is to me, is the most interesting part because it's so subtle and people are like, this floods, but I don't do anything about it,
So as we dig in, and I'm looking through some of your notes here, you're also working in the industry goals for carbon footprint reduction. How do farms play a role in that? Also, are challenges with greenhouse gas allocation and accounting. Dive in a little bit of that work you're doing.
That work is really fun. We are part of a large international grant funded by the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, the FFAR. And we're looking at almost 30 farms in all the locations in Ohio, across the entire state. We're pairing crop farms with perennial systems, so either hay or grazed pasture systems in different counties all around. And then we have different scenarios. So we have older pastures, like plus 20 plus years of perennial areas, or just converted, or 5 years, grazing with diverse forage species. We have high stocking rate, low stocking rate, cow-calf finishing. And I think that with 30 farms and over 150 fields that we're monitoring, we're really going to be able to come up with this potential of sequestration by our forage and grazing areas. And then compared to a crop area. Because I feel like if you talk about carbon credits and carbon markets, the forage and grazing systems, we don't know. There's not a number yet. Most of these farmers are not included in the programs because we just don't know the effect of that. So we're hoping that with this study being comprehensive, we're going to be able to get to a number, at least using Ohio as a case study.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You typically we look at the forage systems because it's already established. So it's not really going into no-till or any of those aspects. So the forage systems are also often left out because they're an established system. Are you looking at just measuring the amount of carbon, or also investigating methodologies to improve the carbon sequestration?
We are measuring the carbon under many different management scenarios. And what we're going to do is we're going to trace this carbon. So we're going to look at, is it coming from roots, from plants, from manure applied versus grazed? Is it coming from, some mineralization or anything that happens within the ecosystem that is changing this carbon? So that is a big, large project. And then within that, we have another look more specifically at only grass-fed, so specifically finishing grass. And what I was thinking is that if you think about the dairy industry, we see numbers now in terms of carbon footprint per protein of milk. Right? We have quality-specific measures, but we don't have that for beef. For beef, is land, is head, or a total pound of steak maybe. But what are the quality aspects of beef that we could relate to sequestration potential, and then add value to this, more premium products that we are producing? So that's a master student project that we're starting now. And the idea is to relate these two things and then take, these numbers out there and say, if you're working so hard to produce premium beef, then you should be able to account for that in your carbon sequestration potential.
Absolutely. It's a really good story, especially on the beef side, to tell about their getting a little bit deeper and a little bit more about what they're doing. And I got to jump into my soil scientist shoes for a little bit, because I'm curious. The variability of soil in a cropping system, trying to measure carbon and track carbon, it's a challenge in a cropping system. You throw animal and you throw perennial species into that. I just got to know from the soil science side, how is your project managing sampling? Because to me, it is it's a sticky world to get into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true, and I think that is the main problem. That is, we just don't have answers. Every time you look at it, you have more and more questions, really. So one thing is we're pairing farms by soil type, but just based on soil maps, right? Not specifically. And then we are collecting soil and reanalyzing for soil type again. There's other measurements that we're taking to come along with that. All of the soil fertilities, organic matter, organic matter fractions, we're going to look at that too. And then it's trying to bring compare into the discussion all of these aspects and how do they talk to each other. But the point that I think is interesting of this research is the comprehensive holistic view. It's an overview. It's not going to be something that we can actually correlate with the soil specificity. We're not going to have this answer, and it's not the question. The question is from a 150 fields point of view. In general, what are the tendencies here? How is this management affecting here or there? Is it, the perenniality taking that direction, or the crop? It's a systems approach project that is going to provide some insights, but not specific answers.
In our last couple of minutes, Dr. Chiavegato, is there any other projects you want to highlight that your group's doing?
This one about the soil, the beef quality, is one that we have been working a lot. I have a very interesting one now. That is, we're looking at vegetable rye grazing integration. So that would be something.
So say that again slowly so I could hear. Vegetable rye integration?
Well, it's a squash.
Okay.
No, sweet potato, squash, rye grazing.
Okay.
Grazing on the rye. I'm not sure how we're going to graze this rye yet, but maybe only at the end as a cover crop, or we're going to have some cycles there.
It's time for our famous three.
Next question is,
my free time, I guess I just spend time with my kids. We go to the zoo. They really like that. We have a nice zoo in Columbus. We go to parks, play soccer, or, practice gymnastics, things that they like to do, and spend time with them.
Fantastic. Anybody with kids knows that you don't really have personal free time. You have children's free time. That's
free time is their time.
Yeah. And then finally, so if our listeners want to find out more about what you're doing in your program, where do they go to?
So my profile is up in the two departments' website, the Department of Horticulture and Crop Science at OSU, and also the Department of Animal Science. But I also do use Twitter, and I post there some of our publications and things that our lab's doing, events that we're participating, field days. We have a youth children's event coming up next week, so I'll be posting there too. I think that is a nice resource just to see what we're doing.
Marilia, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Again, we have with us today Dr. Marilia Chiavegato, Assistant Professor of Agroecosystems Management, Department of Horticulture and Crop Sciences, Department of Animal Sciences at The Ohio State University. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. This was my pleasure. I'm really happy that you guys reach out, and I'm always happy to talk about my work. So thank you so much.
That was great, Joy. Now, folks, if you enjoyed what you heard today, make sure you hit the subscribe button to follow our channel so you know when we have new releases. Also, share this video with your friends, your counterparts, your cohorts. Let them know what we're doing here at the Crop Science Podcast. And of course, leave us a comment if you have any suggestions of what we should talk about, either a topic or a special guest. Thank you so much.